Hi. Sorry
Hi.
for being late. Shall we start now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So, could you tell me about yourself and your experience in Java development?
Yeah, sure. So basically, for the past 3 years, I have been a Java developer and working on backend system by using Spring Boot, Spring Security, REST APIs, etc., etc. And after getting my computer science degree, I started working on Spring Boot, microservices, and connecting APIs. And then later, I worked with complex projects, and I also led and delivered few features of the complex projects to the clients. So that's all about myself and my experience in Java development.
Okay. So, can you tell me about the projects where you applied these frameworks?
Okay, so basically, one of the most challenging project I worked on, converting an existing monolithic application into microservice architecture for a financial service company, right? And
Okay.
the goal was to improve scalability and make the system more resilient to the changes. And for this, we basically chose Spring Boot for its microservices support and Hibernate for ORM features. Okay, and the biggest challenge we faced was the data migration and dividing the monolithic database into the smaller and service specific, right? This was very difficult and we faced a lot of complexities in maintaining data consistency and handling transaction across services. And to overcome this, we implemented the Saga pattern for managing distributed transactions. So yeah, so that's
Okay.
how we applied these frameworks.
Mm. Okay. So, what is this Saga pattern?
Okay. So basically, the Saga pattern is a way to manage data consistency across microservices in a distributed transaction scenario. Imagine we are working with several different services and we need to make sure that some tasks are done correctly together. Okay. So if
Mhm.
something goes wrong and with one task and we have to go back and undo the previous task to avoid mess. So it's kind of safety net and it will ensure that either everything completes successfully or if nothing happened at all through rollback.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
that.
which Java version do you use in your current project?
Currently, we use Java 11 in our project. So yeah,
Okay. Okay, so can you tell me some new features of Java 11 which are not there in older version?
okay. So basically, Java 11 introduced several features like now we have new HTTP client API, which officially made it easier for us to send HTTP requests and HTTP responses, right? And this API support both synchronous and asynchronous programming models and making our code flexible. And Java 11 also introduced local variable syntax for Lambda parameters. Basically, it is enhancing the readability of Lambda expressions. So this means now we can use a var keyword in Lambda expressions and making our code cleaner and more concise. And along with these features,
Hmm.
Java 11 also introduced some string methods like is blank, strip leading, etc., etc. So yeah.
Okay, so now moving to the next question, can you tell me about singleton classes?
Okay. Okay. So basically, a singleton class in Java is kind of a special class that can have only one instance, or we can say one object at any time. Okay. So it's like having only one key of the root. And this is useful when we want to make sure there's just one shared resource, like a configuration setting or a connection to a database. So yeah, that's singleton classes.
Okay, okay, so how can we create this singleton classes?
Okay, so in order to make singleton class, first we have to make a constructor as private, right? Next, we have to create a private static instance of the class, right? And finally, we have to provide static method instance. So yeah, that's how we can create singleton class.
Okay, so are these threads safe?
Are these threads safe? Okay. No, actually, singleton classes are not thread safe by default. If
Hmm.
multiple threads try to create an instance at the same time, it could result in multiple instances. Okay, so to prevent this, we can synchronize the method that creates the instance, or we also can use a static initializer.
Okay, so then how will you create a thread safe singleton in Java using double check locking?
Okay, using double check locking. Okay, so to create a thread safe singleton in Java by using double check locking, I would first declare a private static instance of the class, but I won't initialize it right away. Okay.
Mhm,
And then I would make a public static method to get the instance. Inside this method, I will check if the instance is null. Okay. And
mhm.
if it is null, I'll basically synchronize on a block using the class object. And inside this synchronized block, I will check again if the instance is null. Okay. If it is still null, then I will definitely initialize it. And this way, I'll only synchronize the first time the instance is created and making it a thread safe. So yeah, that's how we can
Mhm.
create a thread safe
Okay,
singleton.
so now moving to the next question, why the main method is public and static?
Okay, so main method is public because JRE, Java Runtime Environment, can access it from outside the class. As the main method is the entry point of the program, if it were not public, then JRE would not be able to call it, and it will
Mhm,
be preventing the program from starting. So now talking about why it is static, because now it can be invoked without creating an instance or without creating an object of the class. So when the program starts, there is not any object of the class available to the main method. Okay, and hence this method must be static, and this allow JRE to call the main method directly using the class name without creating any instance or object.
okay, so can we override this main method?
Hmm, I think yes, we can technically override this main method, and actually, here overriding means changing the behavior of a method in a subclass. Okay, since the main method is static, we can actually do is we can write a main method in a subclass, so it's not overriding but hiding the original main method. And
Mhm.
static method basically belong to the class they are defined in and not to the object of the class. So when we define a main method in a subclass, basically we are doing nothing but providing another entry point for the Java program, and JRE can invoke any main method as the entry point when we run the application. And it also depends on which class name we specified to the Java command. So here it means we can have multiple main methods across different classes in our Java program, which where each entry point, sorry, where each this main method means as entry point, and yeah, so that's how we can override.
Okay, so do you know about serialized data?
Okay, so yeah, serialized data means to the process of converting an object's state into a format that can be easily stored or transmitted, and then reconstructing it back into a copy of the original object. So that is serialized data.
Okay, so and why shouldn't we serialize data into a text file?
Okay, so basically, so because serialized data is a binary
Mhm,
serialized data in binary format, and text files are meant for text. Okay, so when binary data is stored in a text file, it means encoding issues can correct to the data and making it unreadable or causing loss of information. So it's more practical to use file formats like bin for binary serialized data. Okay, and for human
okay,
readable formats like converting objects to JSON or XML, then saving them in a text file, I think it's a better approach. So yeah, that's how, I mean, that's why we shouldn't serialize it into
okay,
Excel.
okay. So what happen if your serializable class contain a member that is not serializable, and how will you fix it?
Okay, so basically, if my seriable class contains a member that is not serializable, then Java throws an error. I think that is not serializable exception. So when we try to serialize the object, okay. So this happens because the Java serialization mechanism requires all the objects member to support serialization if the object itself is to be serialized. And
Mm-hmm.
in order to fix this issue, I think I can make the member as serializable, and I can mark the member as transient, and I can make custom serialization. So yeah, by doing this, we can fix this
Mm-hmm.
issue.
Okay, so what is this transient?
Okay, so basically transient is one of the keyword, I think one of the keyword in Java, and I'm not too much aware on this, but I think it is used to indicate that a field should not be serialized. Okay, when an object is serialized, field marked with transient are skipped and not included in the serialized representation of the object. So I think this is useful for fields that are either not serializable themselves, or that contains information that should not be persisted, or the I mean information is sensitive like password. So I think that is
Okay,
transient.
okay, nice. So let's move to the next question. How does garbage collection work in Java?
Okay, so basically, garbage collection in Java automatically frees memory by removing objects that are no longer used. Okay, and it finds objects that the program no longer references, and basically, it frees the memory used by these objects, making space for new objects. And this process helps prevent memory leaks, and Java handles this automatically. So we don't need to manually manage memory allocation and deallocation like how we used to do, I think, in other
Hmm.
programming language like C.
Okay, so do finalize keyword has any role here in garbage collection?
Yes, the finalize. I mean, we have actually a method called name finalize that plays a role in the garbage collection in Java, but it's limited and not recommended for general use. So this
Hmm.
method is actually called by garbage collector on an object when it's determined that
Okay,
there are no more references to the object. And it means to give the object a chance to clean up resources before it's collected, such as closing file streams or releasing network connection. So
okay.
yeah.
So can you tell me what algorithm JVM use for garbage collection?
Okay. Let mm, actually, yeah, I'm not aware on this.
Okay, okay, no problem. So how can we memory leaks occur in Java even we have automatic garbage collection?
Okay, so even with automatic garbage collection in Java, memory leaks can occur if objects are unintentionally held in memory when they are no longer needed. Okay, so this usually happens due to some reasons. Like first reason would be if an object is referenced by a static field, it stays in a memory for the lifetime of the program because static fields
Hmm.
belong to the class, not an object or instance. Second reason might be objects stored in collection like list, maps, sets, etc., and not removed when they are no longer needed and can lead to memory leaks. And
Hmm.
third reason, I think, not registering callbacks can keep objects alive unnecessarily, since the objects holding these references cannot be garbage collected. So I think
Okay,
due to these reasons,
so
yeah.
okay. So can you tell me the difference between young generation and old generation memory spaces?
Okay, so young generation and old generation. Sorry, I'm not aware on this.
Okay, okay, no problem. So okay, let's move to the different question. How do you ensure the quality and maintainability of your code in your project?
Okay, so to ensure my project's code quality and maintainability, I actually focus on several practices. Okay, I basically do regular code reviews with peers, and yeah, definitely that can help catch bugs early. And I also write unit test cases for individual components to confirm whether what I have done is working as expected or not, and integration tests to ensure all the components are working together. And I sometimes automate building and testing my code after each update that will quickly identify issues and I also tried to code coverage up to 100%. So these are my code practices, and that's how I ensure the quality and maintainability.
Mhm. Okay. Okay, let's say you observe that a Spring Boot application performs slower in the production environment compared to the development setup. What step would you take to address this issue?
Okay, so when a Spring Boot application is slower in production than in development, so I think I can start by checking the logs for errors or slow processes, like why it is slow, right? Then I would use monitoring tools to track the performance metrics like memory usage, CPU load, and response time. And I think then I would compare configurations between development and production to find the differences. And also, I will check if the database queries are optimized and if external services used in production are affecting performance. So based on these findings, I'll make the decision and improve the application.
Okay, so can you tell me how do you integrate a relational database just like a, MySQL with a Spring Boot application?
Okay, so basically, in order to integrate a relational database like MySQL with the Spring Boot application, first we have to, first I add MySQL dependency in projects build file like POM. Then in application properties file, I set up the connection details for MySQL like database URL and credentials. Then I create a repository interfaces in our code using Spring Boot Starter Data JPA, which helps in interacting with MySQL. And finally, I use these repositories in my services to save, update, retrieve. All the CRUD operations in through this
Okay.
MySQL database.
Okay, so how would you modify an existing Spring Boot application to convert into a serverless architecture?
Okay, so I would break down the monolithic application. First, I would break down the monolithic application into the smaller and self-contained services and containerize them using technologies like Docker. Next, I would select a serverless platform such as AWS, Lambda, or Azure Functions, and I would
Hmm.
refactor the code of each services to work as independent serverless functions, removing unnecessary dependencies. Right then I would configure event triggers for these functions, like I'll define runtime environment parameters and deploy them to the chosen serverless platform. And additionally, I would set up an API gateway if needed, right? And I would handle the data storage with serverless database, and I'll ensure proper testing, monitoring, security practices, and optimizing of course, etc., etc. And so this transformation basically will enable better scalability, and it will reduce infrastructure management and cost efficiency. And that's how I would modify an existing Spring Boot application into the serverless architecture.
Okay, so can you just tell me how does Spring Boot make the decision on which server to use?
Okay, so yeah, I can tell you. So basically, Spring Boot decides which server to use based on the class path dependencies. Okay. If a specific server dependency like Tomcat, Jetty, or Undertow is present, then Spring Boot auto configure it as a default server. Right. If no server dependency is found, then Spring Boot defaults to Tomcat as it's included the Spring Boot
Hmm.
starter web. Right. And I think this automatic serve selection, this automatically select simplify set. This simplify our setup and configuration, and it will allow us to focus more on developing the application rather than configuring server details.
Okay, so how would you handle exceptions in a Spring Boot REST application?
Okay, so basically to handle exceptions effectively in a Spring Boot REST application, I would start by identifying the types of exception that might occur. For example, custom exception or built-in one like null pointer exception, right? And then next, I would definitely create a custom exception class for specific error scenarios, right? And I would utilize controller advice annotation to create a dedicated class responsible for this global exception handling. Okay. And inside this class, I would define methods with the exceptional handler annotation, and each handling a specific exception type. Okay, so these methods should return meaningful responses with appropriate HTTP status code and error message. Let's say if someone is returning, I mean, some code is returning 401, some might 404. So this way, will be returning the error messages with the HTTP status code. And when an exception occurs in my REST controller, I would simply throw the corresponding custom exceptions and allowing Spring Boot to reroute it to the appropriate exceptional handling method. So that's how I would handle exception in Spring Boot REST application.
Okay, nice. How can we handle multiple beans of the same type?
Okay, so yeah, basically to handle multiple beans of the same type uh, 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 in Spring, we can use qualifier annotation. This lets us
Mm-hmm.
specify which bean to inject and when there are multiple beans available. Okay, for example, if
Mm-hmm.
there are two beans of the type data source, so we can give each a name and use qualifier annotation to tell Spring which one to use. Okay, and another way is to use primary annotation on one of the beans, and it will be marking it as a default choice when injecting the type.
Okay, so
Yeah.
can you just tell me that in the Spring framework, what is the aspect-oriented programming?
Okay, so basically, aspect-oriented programming is one of the programming approach that helps in
Mm-hmm.
separating concerns in a program, especially those that cut across multiple parts of an application, right? And our main program code focuses on the core functionality, while the aspects take care of the other common tasks that need to happen in various places, like logging, security checks, or managing transactions, etc., etc. And for example, in a Java application, we might have methods where we want to log information every time they are called, right? Or check that user has a
Okay.
right permission, right? Let's say we are having these methods, right? Instead of putting this logging or security code into the every method, we can define it once in aspect and then specify where and when this code should be applied across our application. So this keeps our main code cleaner and more focused on its primary task. So yeah, that's all about aspect oriented programming in the Spring framework.